In the evening, my mother-in-law called and invited us for Easter dinner. Her voice was overly sweet, and I already sensed she was up to something. But what she had prepared surpassed all my expectations. When we stepped into her house, I saw a familiar face. I remembered the smell of her Easter bread, vanilla with a hint of bitter almond. It was sitting on the table next to mine. Tall. Perfectly baked, with icing dripping down in neat white lines. And mine? Mine was short, a little burnt on top, even though I had stayed up all night baking it without a wink of sleep. "Oh, how interesting," Caroline said, leaning over my bread. Her voice was soft, almost sympathetic. "What happened? Didn't the dough rise?" "Mine always turns out taller." Dorothy Wilson barely glanced at my bread. "Oh, Lisa brought her Easter bread," she said in a tone as if I had brought something completely inappropriate instead of holiday pastries. Then she turned to Caroline. "Come on, dear, let's finish painting the eggs. Yours always come out so pretty." I stood there in the hallway, coat still on, holding my bag, watching them sit together at the kitchen table, my mother-in-law and my husband's ex-girlfriend. Caroline dipped an egg into red dye while Dorothy held the jar steady. They looked so natural together, like I hadn't even come, like this house still belonged to the two of them. 4 years ago, I met Evan at a high school reunion. I remember him talking about his job at a construction company, laughing at classmates' jokes. I had known him since school. He was a year ahead. Back then, he was dating Caroline Harris from the class next door. A beautiful girl with long light brown hair, always wearing a perfectly ironed uniform, always getting straight A's. Caroline broke up with Evan before college. "I just want to live for myself for a while, try dating other people," she told him then. But she never fully cut ties. She called him every now and then, met up as friends, as she put it, and Dorothy stayed close with her. "She's like a daughter to me. I've known her since she was little," my mother-in-law explained. That first Easter evening I came to their house, I saw photos on the living room wall. Evan and Caroline hugging outside a church after graduation. She was wearing a white dress, he was in a dark suit. Another photo of them cutting a birthday cake together. Another one skating, Caroline holding his hand. "Yes, baking Easter bread is a special art," Dorothy chimed in. "Not everyone can do it." She put Caroline's bread next to mine, making the difference even more obvious. I felt like a clumsy outsider who had brought awkward gifts to someone else's home. At the dinner table, Dorothy read the Easter prayer. We all stood up and kissed the icon. Caroline kissed Evan 3 times. "It's a Christian tradition," she said, but it felt too tender, her lips lingering on his cheek. He didn't pull away, just blushed slightly. That night, walking home, Evan apologized. "Mom's just used to Caroline. They go to church together, she's like a daughter to her. Do you want me to talk to her?" I answered proudly. "No need. God sees everything. I won't let them break me." But inside, something had already cracked. Something small yet deeply important. 2 years later, Evan and I got married. Caroline was at our wedding. Dorothy insisted. "We're all family," she explained. Caroline gave us a set of china she had once picked out for herself and Evan. "May it serve you well," she said, hugging the groom. My mother-in-law's new tactics were subtler. She didn't attack me openly but used little jabs. "Caroline is like my own daughter," she'd say whenever Evan tried to protest. He'd start to argue, but his mother always changed the subject smoothly. I decided not to show that her words hurt me. I'll rise above their pettiness, I thought. Time will put everything in its place. But Caroline didn't seem to plan on leaving our lives. She regularly gave Evan little mementos. A pen. "Remember this pen? You wrote your senior essay with it." A music CD. Our song. "Remember how we danced to it at prom?" Everyone pretended it was normal. The worst part started happening in public. It was at a birthday party for one of our mutual friends. Evan worked with the birthday guy at the same company. There were about 12 people at the table, everyone drinking and having fun. And then Dorothy turned to me in front of everyone. "Lisa, tell us, how did you manage to win over our Evan? Was it your looks, your brains? We've all been wondering." Everyone chuckled softly, but I could tell they'd discussed me before, behind my back. I answered calmly. "Probably my patience." The laughter grew louder. Then Caroline added, "Yeah, patience is important. Not everyone can wait so long for their happiness." Evan saw it all, but he was too afraid to start a family scandal. "At home," he said, "Mom's just upset that I've grown up. She'll get used to it." And I believed him, because I wanted to believe him. Because I loved him and didn't want to seem like a jealous fool. But deep down, I was already at my breaking point. Every visit to my mother-in-law became a trial. Every time Caroline showed up at our house, and she came over easily, she even had her own key just in case, it felt like a small torture for me. I held on with everything I had, playing the role of the understanding wife who was above petty insults. Caroline knew exactly what she was doing. She never crossed the line openly, but every gesture, every word was calculated. She knew how to create an atmosphere where I felt like a stranger in my own family. And the worst part was that I started to believe it myself. Dorothy's 50th birthday fell on a Thursday. That same day, Evan had an important corporate event, a presentation for a project he'd been working on for 6 months. My mother-in-law found out about it a week earlier and immediately started pressing him. "Really, Evan? Is work more important than your own mother? I only turned 50 once in my life, and you have those presentations every month." We tried to find a compromise, stop by for an hour or so to congratulate her and then leave for the corporate event. "Mom will understand," Evan said, but I could see how nervous he was. Dorothy agreed to the plan far too easily, which should have warned me. Her apartment was full of guests, colleagues from her school, neighbors, distant relatives, all dressed up and festive. I wore a new dress, dark blue and formal, bought specially for the corporate. Dorothy looked me over and nodded. "Pretty. Business style suits you." Caroline was there, of course. In a white dress, holding a bouquet of roses for Dorothy. She helped set the table, knew where every plate and glass was kept, acted like the hostess. Guests called her our beautiful Caroline. I was introduced as Evan's wife. Time dragged on slowly. At 7:30, I reminded Evan about his presentation. He nodded and walked over to his mother. "Mom, we have to go. Thank you for a wonderful evening." Dorothy glanced at the clock and exclaimed, "What? You're leaving already?" But the surprise hasn't even happened yet. Caroline worked so hard on it. "What surprise?" Evan asked, but Dorothy was already clapping her hands to get everyone's attention. "My dear friends, now for the real surprise." From the kitchen, 2 cakes were brought out. One said "Happy Birthday" and the other said "10 years of our love." I felt my chest go cold. Caroline stood up, tucked her hair behind her ear, and showed everyone a ring on a thin chain around her neck. "Evan gave me this 10 years ago. Back then he wanted to propose, but I wasn't ready for something serious. Now I realize, maybe I made a mistake saying no." The guests murmured. Someone said, "What a romantic story." Another, "We never knew." Dorothy cut their cake and fed Caroline a piece with a spoon, like she was a little girl. Then she held out the spoon to Evan. "And for you, son, your favorite Napoleon cake." Everyone watched us like it was some stage performance. I stood next to my husband, realizing this was all a carefully planned scene. A play where I was just an extra. Evan didn't take the spoon. He looked at the cake, at his mother, at Caroline. His face was turning redder and redder. "Enough," he said quietly. Then louder. "Enough. This hurts. I'm disgusted. You've turned my life into a circus." He grabbed my hand. "We're leaving. For good." His palm was hot and damp. Dorothy turned pale. Evan, what are you saying? We were just reminiscing about the past. And Caroline added in a trembling voice, I didn't mean to upset anyone. I just showed the ring. Forever means forever, Evan repeated, pulling me toward the door. The guests were shocked. For the first time in all these years, Evan publicly stood up for me. For the first time, he didn't try to explain it away or calm everyone down. We rode home in silence. I didn't know what to say. Evan's hand was still shaking. He was holding mine so tightly that there were red marks on my wrist. At home, he sat down on the couch and buried his face in his hands. You always told me not to interfere, he said without looking up. You said you could handle it yourself. But it hurt me too, seeing them humiliate you. And you? You never even asked me for help. I sat down next to him. I was afraid to seem weak. Afraid you'd choose them over me. So I stayed silent. The words came out with difficulty, but I was finally saying what had been building up for years. I thought if I stayed patient and wise, if I didn't make a scene, time would fix everything. But time didn't fix anything. Do you know what's the worst part? Evan lifted his head. His eyes were red. I saw how much you were hurting, but I pretended not to notice because it was easier that way. I didn't have to choose between my mother and my wife. I didn't have to ruin relationships. We talked until morning. He told me how Caroline would call him at work, how his mother sent messages through her, how they discussed our family life together. I realized they had never planned to accept me. To them, I was just a temporary inconvenience that would eventually go away. What do we do now? I asked as dawn broke outside the window. We start over, he said. Without them. Completely without them. We hugged each other and cried, out of relief, out of pain, out of finally telling each other the truth. For the first time in months, I felt like we were truly husband and wife, not actors in someone else's play. The next morning, we changed our phone numbers. We blocked Dorothy and Caroline on all social media. Evan wrote his mother a letter, short and without explanations. Don't call, don't come. We need time. He sent it by regular mail so she wouldn't be tempted to reply right away. For 3 weeks, there was silence. I almost believed it was over. We planned a vacation, talked about having kids, started looking for a new apartment far away from his mother. It felt like we were finally free. But I didn't know Dorothy well enough. She wasn't the type to give up without a fight. The call came at 10:30 on a Tuesday night. Evan and I were watching a TV show. I was ironing his shirts for the next day. Uncle Stephen's number lit up on the screen, Dorothy's brother. Evan, get to the hospital right now, his panicked voice yelled through the phone. Your mom had a heart attack. She's in intensive care. Hurry, or you might not make it in time. We rushed to get dressed. Evan was as pale as a sheet. His hands were shaking as he zipped up his jacket. Oh God, what have I done? He whispered. It's my fault. I gave her a heart attack. I helped him wrap his scarf, though my own mind was numb with fear. The taxi drove across the whole city. Evan kept calling his uncle, but he didn't pick up. He's probably talking to the doctors, I guessed. We sat in silence, holding hands. I kept thinking that no matter how I felt about Dorothy, she was still my husband's mother. If something happened to her, Evan would never forgive himself. The hospital smelled of disinfectant and quiet. Uncle Stephen was waiting in the hallway. Room 8, he said without meeting our eyes. The doctor said her heart couldn't take the stress. She keeps asking about you too. We went up to the second floor. Evan walked ahead of me. At the door to room 8, he stopped, took a deep breath, and pushed it open. Dorothy was sitting on the bed in pink pajamas, looking fresh and rosy. Caroline was next to her, peeling a mandarin orange. There was a fruit basket and a box of chocolates on the nightstand. Oh, honey, I'm so glad you came, Dorothy exclaimed, reaching out her hands. The doctor said my heart just couldn't handle all this stress. I was so worried about you. Evan looked around, confused, at his mother, at Caroline, at the chocolates. Mom, how are you feeling? What did the doctor say? I'm feeling better now, Dorothy replied. Caroline stayed with me all night, never left my side. That's what a real daughter does. At that moment, a nurse walked into the room. She was young and looked tired. When she saw us, she asked in surprise, "Oh, are you getting discharged already? I thought you were just here for some tests." Your EKG was normal. Dorothy instantly turned pale. Caroline dropped her mandarin. The nurse realized she'd said something wrong and quickly left. Silence filled the room. Evan slowly turned to his mother. Your EKG was normal? Tests? So there was no heart attack? Sweetie, I really did feel bad. His mother started to defend herself. My chest hurt, my blood pressure was high. The doctor suggested I stay for tests, just to be sure. Uncle Stephen said you were in intensive care. Evan spoke very quietly, but I could hear the anger rising in his voice. He just overreacted. Caroline tried to jump in. We didn't think you'd get so scared. Evan looked at them both. At his mother with her box of chocolates, at Caroline with her mandarin, at the cozy hospital room that looked more like a hotel suite. You're even using your health to manipulate, he said coldly. This is the end. We walked out of the room. Behind us, we could hear voices. Dorothy was shouting something. Caroline was crying. But we didn't look back. 2 months passed after that hospital visit. We found an apartment in a different neighborhood. Evan got a job at a new company. Life was slowly getting back on track. I even started thinking the worst was behind us. One evening, I was walking home from work and decided to stop by a little cafe near our old place. I wanted to buy a cake for a colleague's birthday. The cafe, called Lisa's, was small and cozy, with 3 tables by the window. Dorothy and Caroline were sitting at one of them, sipping tea and talking quietly. When they saw me, they fell silent. I wanted to turn around and leave, but it was too late. They stood up and walked over without saying a word. Dorothy was holding a glass cup of hot tea. This is for ruining our family, she said and threw the tea right in my face. The pain was so sharp that I screamed. The boiling tea burned my cheek, neck, and hands. Caroline added, We loved him, and you stole him. You took a son away from his mother. The waitress called an ambulance. The cafe erupted in chaos. People jumped up, some recorded on their phones, others offered help. Dorothy and Caroline calmly gathered their things and walked out as if nothing had happened. At the hospital, they treated my burns. Luckily, they weren't too serious. The doctor said if I took care of them properly, there would be no scars. Evan came running half an hour later, pale and shaken. We filed a police report. Dorothy was fined for disorderly conduct. A small fine, almost a joke. But it didn't matter to me. I realized the most important thing: they were capable of anything. They had no boundaries. We're leaving, Evan said that same night. For good. We'll move to a new area, you'll get a new job. I will too. We'll start fresh. It took a month to move. We cut off all ties with mutual acquaintances, changed not just our address but our gym, our grocery store, even our clinic. Evan's father, a quiet, beaten-down man, called once. I don't judge you, but I can't go against Dorothy. I hope you understand. We understood. And we never expected another call from him. A year later, I was standing in the kitchen of our new apartment, making dinner. Outside the window was a courtyard I didn't recognize, with a playground. New neighbors were walking their dogs. Life went on. A life where we had no past. Evan came home from work and kissed me on the cheek. Where the burn had been, there was now only a faint pink spot. How are you? He asked. I'm good, I answered. And it was true. Our kids, if we ever had them, would never know Grandma Dorothy. And that was for the best. I was no longer playing the role of the patient daughter-in-law. I was just living. And that was my victory.